Paddington was just thinking what a lot of excitement pressing one small button could cause when a heavy hand descended on his shoulder. "That's him!" someone shouted, pointing an accusing finger. "Saw him do it with me own eyes, as large as life." "Hit with a suitcase!" shouted another voice. "Ought not to be allowed!" While from the back of the crowd someone else suggested sending for the police. Paddington began to feel frightened. He turned and looked up at the owner of the hand. "Oh," said a stern voice. "It's you again. I might have known." The inspector took out a notebook. "Name, please?"
Paddington," said Paddington.
"I said, what's your name, not where you want to go," repeated the inspector.
"That's right," said Paddington. "That is my name."
"Paddington," said the inspector disbelievingly. "It can't be. That's the name of the station. I've never heard of a bear called Paddington before."
"It's very unusual," said Paddington, "but it's Paddington Brown, and I live at number 32 Windsor Gardens, and I've lost Mrs. Brown and Judy."
"Oh."
The inspector wrote something in his book. "Can I see your ticket?"
I had it," said Paddington, "but I don't seem to any more."
The inspector began writing again.
"Playing on the escalator. Traveling without a ticket. Stopping the escalator. All serious offenses they are." He looked up. "What have you got to say to that, young feller, me lad?"
"Well,
Paddington shifted uneasily and looked down at his paws.
"Have you tried looking inside your hat?" asked the inspector, not unkindly. "People often put their tickets in there." Paddington jumped with relief. "I knew I had it somewhere," he said thankfully as he handed it to the inspector. The inspector handed it back again quickly. The inside of Paddington's hat was rather sticky. "I've never known anyone take so long not to get anywhere," he said, looking hard at Paddington. "Do you often travel on the Underground?" "It's the first time," said Paddington.
"And the last, if I have anything to do with it," said Mrs. Brown as she pushed her way through the crowd.
"Is this your bear, madam?" asked the inspector. "Because if it is, I have to inform you that he's in serious trouble." He began to read from his notebook. "As far as I can see, he's broken 2 important regulations, probably more. I shall have to give him into custody." "Oh, dear!" Mrs. Brown clutched at Judy for support. "Do you have to? He's only small, and it's his first time out in London. I'm sure he won't do it again."
"Ignorance of the law is no excuse," said the inspector ominously. "Not in court. Persons are expected to abide by the regulations. It says so."
"In court!" Mrs. Brown passed a hand nervously over her forehead. The word court always upset her. She had visions of Paddington being taken away in handcuffs and being cross-examined and all sorts of awful things. Judy took hold of Paddington's paw and squeezed it reassuringly. Paddington looked up gratefully. He wasn't at all sure what they were talking about, but none of it sounded very nice.
"Did you say persons are expected to abide by the regulations?" Judy asked firmly.
"That's right," began the inspector, "and I have my duty to do the same as everyone else." "But it doesn't say anything about bears?" asked Judy innocently.
"Well,"
the inspector scratched his head. "Not in so many words." He looked down at Judy, then at Paddington, and then all around. The escalator had started up again and the crowd of sightseers had disappeared. "It's all highly irregular," he said, "but—" "Oh, thank you," said Judy. "I think you're the kindest man I've ever met. Don't you think so, Paddington?" Paddington nodded his head vigorously, and the inspector blushed. "I shall always travel on this Underground in future," said Paddington politely. "I'm sure it's the nicest in London." The inspector opened his mouth and seemed about to say something, but he closed it again. "Come along, children," said Mrs. Brown hastily. "If we don't hurry up, we shall never get our shopping done." From somewhere up above came the sound of some dogs barking. The inspector sighed. "I can't understand it," he said. "This used to be such a well-run, respectable station. Now look at it."
He stared after the retreating figures of Mrs. Brown and Judy with Paddington bringing up the rear, and then he rubbed his eyes. "That's funny," he said more to himself. "I must be seeing things. I could have sworn that bear had some bacon sticking out of his case." He shrugged his shoulders. There were more important things to worry about. Judging by the noise coming from the top of the escalator, there was some sort of dogfight going on. It needed investigating.